We're here today with Steve Krug. Steve, thank you very much for doing this with us.
I'm very glad we've been trying to do it for a while. We're glad to have a chance.
So let me just jump into the first question, and I'm going to use my little teleprompter here.
Yes.
Why is it so hard for people to sponsor research, UX research?
Well, personally, I take a rather pessimistic view of it. I tend to think that usability / user experience work hasn't risen to the level of a required budget line item. The way, we wouldn't launch a product without marketing, for instance. So when you set out your budget, you're going to have a big chunk for marketing. User experience, while it's come a long ways, particularly in the last maybe 5 years, in terms of visibility and people's sense that it may be something that they need, I don't think it's achieved that status. I think it's still sort of in the last in, first out position where times get hard and money gets short. It's going to be one of the first things thrown overboard, and we'll assume that Bob can do it. We'll just make it part of the developer's job or the designer's job or whatever. So,
in your experience, does it happen? Because I hear a lot that people, when they look for things to cut off a quote, a proposal, a project proposal, research is the first thing.
Yeah.
So do they do that, or
this is purely surmise on my part because I spend 95% of my time in my basement home office. So I always have to tell people I don't get around that much. I go out and I teach workshops and so I, do have contact with a lot of people from a lot of different levels in different kinds of organizations, from sole practitioners to people who run UX departments in big corporations. So I have that kind of contact, but I don't feel like I get out and around the way you would usually think of as a consultant does. So a lot of it's surmise on my part, but I get enough feedback from people when I say something like that. I get enough feedback from people saying, yeah, that's it. We're scraping here. We're getting more prestige and more mind share and more meeting time than we did a couple of years ago, but we're far from indispensable.
Okay.
So how does that map onto your experience?
Well,
having written a whole book about it.
I have, and the truth is that my book is not based on my current workplace.
Right.
My current workplace is very mature about that.
And there are, we read about them, but we know about them, we know people who work at them. There are some workplaces which are very mature, both ranging from large entities where they have created, management positions that are solely related to user experience, down to startups where I think actually probably more at the top and bottom of it, where startups now, the lean startup movement, sort of one of the tenets of it, I think, is UX.
Yeah.
Right? That if you're going to throw it out the door and constantly improve it, then you're going to have to be putting effort into UX, and it's kind of Apple inspired, more or less. That Apple had such a great success by paying attention to user experience. Maybe we can too. But in between, I think there's a huge disparity. But so your book isn't based on your own current experience.
No, not the current experience. It's based on hard
past lives.
Past lives and hard experience. Hard experience is there. Today, it's much easier. Although you have other challenges that you face when you work in a more mature organization. Now, and with smart people, that I couldn't say I was always working with smart people.
Right.
And they challenge you all the time.
Right. And even with smart people, I think one of the things that's happened is by virtue of the fact that there are now more people who understand the notion that there is such a thing as UX. It's kind of that and the influx of people into UX with differing capabilities and different backgrounds is sort of forcing the issue of, well, what is UX? Is it usability? Is it information architecture? Should we be doing wireframes? Do we have to, what if we're going to buy some UX, what is it we should be buying? And it's like,
we need free UXs. Yeah, I see that a lot. A lot of people understand that it's important, but when you ask them what it is, to define UX, you hear so many different definitions. So you mentioned your clients that you're working less with, actually doing usability testing and more.
Well, I don't do. It's just between the two of us. I don't actually do usability testing these days because since I'm out there telling people that they can and should be doing it themselves, and that if they have the money to hire a professional, there are many very competent professionals at this point looking to do the work. So it doesn't make sense for me to say hire me at consultant rate to come in and run usability tests for you. I'll train your people to do usability tests. I'll review your initial experiences and coach you and whatever if that's the reasonable thing to do. Mostly I teach workshops, but it does. I'm not out there. In fact, I'm at the point where I got to do something because I got to start doing some mobile usability testing.
There you go.
So I know what it's all about.
So back in the days when you did usability testing,
right, which was I did it for a long time.
Yeah. How do you usually?
You should. I mean, not between you and me, but I still do some occasionally, but it's not like I do it routinely.
Yeah. So when you do that, how do you usually report findings to your clients?
I like to think of myself as a pioneer.
I'm asking for this. People always ask me how long are your reports.
Right. And
3 pages, 5, 10, 20.
Some years ago, see, I'm notorious for saying all the time how much I hate writing. That I don't know who the originator is, but somebody said I hate writing. I love having written. It's great to have a book. I hate it probably more than most people. I really detest writing.
I'm with you.
It's not like detest it. I find it to be the hardest work I've ever done.
I relate to that.
And so for before I got into the usability racket, I was a tech writer for about 10 years, which was really miserable. And near the end of the 10 years, I actually finally figured out how to do it, and I was sort of happy doing it for about 2 years. The last 2 years, I knew I could do it, but so then you get into usability, and you're writing usability test reports, or you're writing expert reviews, and again, it's writing, and for me, it's agony. So sometime in the last 10 years, I have to go back and pin down exactly when I started telling my clients, I'm not doing a written report for you. I'll do it because I hate writing so much, and B, because it takes an awful lot of time, which I have to charge you for, and C, because it delays you getting the results by a significant amount of time. So I moved to doing live presentations, where I would encourage, and it was sort of about the time when screen sharing became pretty robust. Two things happened. Everybody had a broadband connection, and screen sharing became robust. And so I started doing them online because my clients were usually far away, so rather than make a trip there to present to them. And I just said, get anybody who might be interested in this into a room on your end, more the merrier. And I will walk you through my findings, and we'll have your product up on the screen, and I'll show you what I mean. And people can raise their objections in real time, as opposed to getting a report and going off and harumphing at their desk about how stupid this consultant is. And they can present them to me, and I can learn from them and react to them and come up with modifications on the spot. And they can present potential fixes for the things that I'm talking about, and I can discuss with them whether I think that's going to raise other usability issues or so you sort of do it all in real time, but mostly get everybody engaged as a group in chewing over these findings and be able to get things out of their system right then. And I did it for my practical purposes. I didn't want to write. But it turned out, I thought, to work really well. So I stopped writing reports. But what I did for the first couple of years was I told people I had a policy where I would do a written report, but the project would then cost twice as much, no matter what the project was. And I only had one client take me up on that, who wanted the report, because they had to, and part of it is that they need, that very often when people want a written report, they want it to prove that something happened. Yeah. Because it's changed now to some extent, but back then, the person who had to sign the check didn't know what a usability test was like. If anything, they thought maybe it was doing focus groups. And they were asking for a reasonable chunk of cash to do it. So rather than come back and say, well, we had a meeting and the consultant said we should do this, they wanted a report to prove that something had happened. So.
And do these people who went into the room, did they also watch the research
Yeah.
sessions?
That's why I kind of relied on getting screen sharing. Well, not the usability test.
No,
No.
the test itself.
No.
Okay.
And in point of fact, by the time I started doing this, I was doing expert reviews. I had already sort of phased out of me personally doing usability tests. I mean, I've done some rounds of usability tests since then, and in that case, I don't actually have a report because I've sort of have stuck to my own method, which is get everybody to come and watch in person, and then you meet as a group right after the test and do your debriefing kind of live then. So I haven't written a test about usability report. I wrote one, which was Ralph Molek did one of his CUE sessions on.
Recommendations?
It wasn't the one on recommendation. I was involved in a little bit, but it was the one about what was the point of it? It was the one where half of us watched, all of us watched videos of usability tests. Half of us watched videos of moderated usability tests, and half of us watched like usertesting.com unmoderated tests. Okay. And then we had to write up a report that we would write, including both observations and recommendations. And then Rolf went off and did 9 months of statistics and compared to see whether these professional usability people would A, see the same things, and B, come up with the same recommendations. So that was the last time I actually wrote a report. And mine was by far the shortest report I've ever written.
One team.
Well, in fact,
page report.
I stuck to my, because it was after I had written the rocket surgery book, and so I actually stuck to my guns, which was that I was only gonna report. I was not going to report more than 10 problems, and they were going to be the 10 most serious problems. So everybody else was reporting 30 and 50 problems, and I said, no, fix these.
Okay. Do you want to ask me anything?
I do. Well, I want to ask you what you've learned since you wrote the book. What do you mean? Because people ask me that sometimes. It's kind of interesting for me to think about it.
So people,
have you changed your mind about anything for one thing since you learned the book?
I learned more techniques, I guess, because people now share more things with me.
Yeah.
So there are several techniques that I use that are not in the book.
Okay.
And if I knew about them, I would have, made sure that they are in the book. But they're not. I'm not regretting anything. But one of the techniques that it's very related to what you just said is a way to not write a report. So what I do, and I gave a talk about it recently. I created what I call a rainbow spreadsheet. The rainbow spreadsheet is a regular spreadsheet. And we work on Google Docs. So the team is there in the observation room. They must be there for at least 50% of the session.
Yeah.
And I as the moderator and they in the other room add observations to that sheet. Right. And it's called a rainbow because each participant gets a color. And if one observation happened for one participant, we color that cell. And if it happened again, we saw the same observation in participant 3 and 5, we color it again. And then in the end of the day, we have a very visual understanding of what was, what were the most popular observations. Yeah. And we talk about solutions. We immediately fill in the spreadsheet. I also use other sheets in the same spreadsheet for tracking, metrics or things like that. Yeah. And I have a place for writing raw notes. I prepare another sheet in advance with participant characteristics. And in the end, I add the URLs of the video recordings to that sheet. And in the end of the day, I just add another sheet with, the main findings, the answers to the research questions, and that's the report. And it's ready when
you're done.
An hour after the study is over. Right. After the last participant left the building. So that's something I learned since. Yeah. And I'm using that every time. It works like magic. And I sometimes have, a senior manager asking, where's the report for that and that? And I say, well, it's not exactly a report, but this is what we had. And and it's good. I mean, all the answers are there, and I'm happy. The team is happy. Everybody knows what happened. They have all of the stuff related to that study in that sheet. So,
and people fill in their observations while the session is going.
Yeah. And I usually, when I run usability study today, I usually run it with 4 people, and during one day, and usually I take 45 minutes between sessions, so I have time to come back to the observation room and talk with them about their observations, because not everybody knows what is an observation. Sometimes they write solutions, sometimes they write their opinions of what's going on and things like that. So we eliminate those and we agree on what's an observation, and then we continue to the other sessions. And at the end of the day, there's not much left to do. That's it.
Yeah.
And we can move on. And there were times that I did a study a week when we were in a very iterative design phase. Such a study per week, you can do that because you don't need to write a report, right? And I highly relate to what you said about writing is agonizing. First, what I need to do first, if I need to write a report, is do something else for 2-3 days. I just can't. I physically can't write a report.
Yeah.
And I always try to find different ways of reporting findings. So
I mean, I liked my reports when I was forced to do them. I felt like they were informative and they were kind of narrative.
They're good for history's sake. If you have, I don't know, I'm an in-house practitioner, so if somebody comes after me, they have material to read. So I'm not saying they're not important. I just can't.
I just wonder. I do wonder when that question comes up again, having no experience in-house. How much, even if you have the archive, you have the history, how much people actually go and refer to it, or they just read it as real anyway.
Yeah.
I'm just having mild skepticism about it. That's all. It seems like a good thing to do, but
maybe. Do you ever check to see if clients implement your recommendations?
Carol and Jared and I did a whole UPA thing about this, about why our recommendations don't get implemented as usability professionals, and whether we should worry about it, why it happens. It was interesting. We did a survey. I used to pay a lot of attention to this. I would go back and check at a couple of month intervals to see whether a client had actually gone ahead and implemented things. And what I realized in the long run was sort of no matter how enthusiastic they were about them, odds were they weren't going to get implemented through a combination of, I knew, many ingredients: politics, changes of management, changes of business objectives, a lack of resources, big one, to the point where one of my tenets now is, get used to it. You no matter who you are, you probably don't have the time and resources to fix anything beyond the most serious usability issues. So get used to it. This stuff is going to be riddled with usability problems. Just make sure they're minor. Make sure they're the least intrusive, at least. So I used to think about it, and then I sort of got philosophical about it. I sort of decided, well, even if it doesn't happen, I'm educating them, and they'll actually do a better job next time around. They'll build in fewer problems last time around, and they'll understand more of it for themselves. They'll be able to draw these judgments, and that's a good thing. And I do believe that, actually. I think one of the things that's happened is, since more people have been exposed to just sitting in usability tests, I think that's one of the big reasons why UX is more widely understood. Because you see a usability, you sit in a usability test and you get it. You understand that it's important. You understand how it works and whatever. So, I'm sort of relieved of the pressure at the moment because I don't do as much consulting. I don't do much consulting, in fact. So I don't. I have had to get over it. I mean, because I can make what there was one about 5 years ago where so I and Elizabeth Bale, who works with me sometimes, we went in and we made a whole bunch of recommendations, and they were great recommendations, and they were exactly what the client needed. And the client, they were like going to carry us off on their shoulders. They were sitting there saying, "We've been waiting for somebody to say this forever, and here's our developer, and tomorrow he's going to be working this."
I mean, the facts, I've
from,
seen that
from
happen.
organization to organization.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is that it's, it's happening exactly as you described. It's happening a lot.
I think it happens less if the closer you are to an agile environment.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, it's still, I mean, even if, as an in-house practitioner, even if it happens to you, I would say changes still happen. I mean, somewhere in the back of their minds, they understand
things are better
more.
somehow.
Yeah. So even if they don't, fix that, button.
But I long ago got over the idea of being frustrated by coming back to the site and seeing that this ridiculous thing still hadn't been fixed. Because I don't run that company.
So let's talk more about what you do these days.
Okay,
So
sure.
my question to you is this: should engineering teams or startup founders hire experts to run usability tests for them, or do it on their own?
Let me think about that one.
Your clients are not watching.
I have to laugh because you stood up at a UPA UXPA presentation a couple of years ago and made like my favorite statement of all time. It's like it was what I've been trying to say through the whole session. And he said, I would rather have one test with one participant who's not from your target audience that's badly facilitated with leading questions than a lot of other things. Because I actually believe that. I really do. I think usability testing is just amazingly effective. And watching somebody try to use the thing that you're building, that's usability testing for me. I think just there's no way you can watch that and not have really valuable insights about what's working and what's not working that take you outside of your own perspective. And so my objective has been to get people to do it. And the main reason for not doing it is because it costs money and takes time. It's a big deal. And I think one of the things that we've learned from Jacob Nielsen starting back in 87 or 89 or whatever was that it doesn't have to be a big deal. You can get the insights with very little effort. You can, if you put more effort and more money into it, you can, within reason, get more insights. But the fact is, it's much more powerful to put a small amount of effort into it that actually gets it done, and then make changes based on that, and then do it again. That's what works. It's literally what works. So yes, I am trying to get everybody to do it themselves because so few. How many organizations can afford to have somebody running usability tests for them full time? Well, a lot, but compared to the number of people who have websites or apps or whatever, it's tiny. There's only maybe 10,000 self-identified. This was usability professionals. A high number for usability professionals a few years ago was like 10,000 worldwide. But even if you throw in all the people who now self-identify as UX professionals, I mean, what is it, like 30,000 or something? It's not huge compared to the amount of work that needs to be done. So if people can do some of it themselves, even if they do a relatively bad job, which they will. I mean, when I wrote the rocket surgery book, the first thing I knew about the rocket surgery book was there was going to be a full page in it, and all it was going to say on that page was, if you can afford to hire a professional, then do it. Because if you have the money to throw at a professional, the odds are very high that they're going to do a much better job of usability testing than you could do yourself, and they'll bring their past experience to making recommendations. But most people can't afford it, so why should people not be doing it? I've gotten very little pushback from the professionals.
So, if sometimes I get asked by mostly startup founders, where is the threshold? Let's say we have money. Of course, we need it for many different things.
Right.
But we have money. What should we do on our own? When should we go? What kind of studies do we do on our own? What kind of studies? What kind of research do we go to an expert with?
Right. Okay. I actually like the classic usability answer of it depends. It really does. I think that's underrated as an answer to usability questions. I think you should look at first you should look at what you can afford to hire staff for. So if you can afford to hire a couple of UX professionals and have them hanging around all the time and just lending themselves to every project as need be, then by all means, throw money into that first,
Mhm.
because it's great to have somebody on site, and they can train and mod and mentor everybody else doing their own stuff. So I certainly start there. In terms of hiring outside work, well, I mean, I would say hire it where special skills are going to pay off more. So even, I mean, the other one that I really like, besides usability testing, is contextual inquiry. I mean, most people don't go out and they're developing something. They don't go out and talk to people who are going to use it. It's like so underutilized. And that was actually the first thing I did as usability. When we made the transition from tech writing to usability, a friend of mine hired me to go do some interviews with Mac users to find out what Mac users wanted in utilities. And so I went, and I didn't know what I was doing except that I'd read Jacob's usability engineering book, and I went out and sat down for like two hours, watched them do their work, and asked them about how they did it and their artifacts and what they wanted. And they were wonderful. I did like 5 of them, and they were. I actually remember some quotes from some of them to this day.
Mm-hmm.
That's how good they were. And but people don't seem to think to do that. It's sort of, everybody's too busy, and you sort of think that somebody in your organization knows who these people are and what they do. That's why you're developing this product, because you have a pretty good sense of what they do. And there's no comparison. Same as there's no comparison to watching a person try and use your stuff. There's no comparison to going out and watching how they do it now. It's just you always learn things you didn't know.
I think it's changing. I mean, have you heard of Steve Blank from Stanford?
A
Stanford professor. He invented a methodology called customer development, which started Eric Ries from the Lean Startup movement.
Right.
He was his student.
Oh, okay.
So we heard him and then developed the Lean Startup approach. Customer development is what we do. It's just in business words that everybody understands. So a lot of startups, this is what they want to do now. We have this bad name, contextual inquiry.
Right.
But maybe it's the terminology. I don't know. Maybe
it wasn't great terminology. It was pretty academic. But it worked well.
All right. Anything else you want to add?
Get people to come and watch. This is my hobby horse. If there's one thing that adds value to this process, it's getting everybody involved, stakeholders, check signers, anybody whose arm you can twist, to come and watch people try and use your stuff live and in person. And that's another reason for keeping it short. Keep just a small number of sessions and do them on site. Don't have some consultant doing people on site. Have to do it right down the hall from where all these people live, so they can come and spend the morning watching. And the first thing to do, if you talk about getting buy-in from my money, the only really good tips that I know to give people is, for your first round of testing, do comparative testing of your competitors. Don't do your own stuff, because everybody will want to come and watch and see usability testing, especially marketing. You'll get everybody from marketing.
That's a good one.
So, that's it.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's really